This is a story about the eastern Mongolian steppe in the middle of the 12th century, before the great empire, before the name of any Khan had reached the wider world, when the grasslands belonged to scattered clans and wandering herds, and a young couple named Batu and Karen were preparing to build their first home together. It begins in late summer along a river valley where the grass still grows tall and the sky is so wide it seems to curve at the edges like the rim of a bowl. A small camp of felt-walled gers sits in the shelter of a low ridge, close enough to the water that the sound of it carries when the wind is still. Smoke rises from the camp in thin blue threads. Horses graze on a nearby hillside, their tails flicking at flies. Somewhere among the gers, a woman is singing. Not a performance, just the quiet, tuneless kind of singing that comes with morning work. This is a cot ale, a cooperative herding camp of several related families, and it has been here since early summer, settled in these pastures where the grass is rich and the river bends wide enough to water hundreds of animals. But autumn is not far off. Already the nights have grown cooler. Already the light has shifted, arriving later and departing sooner, so that the shadows stretch longer across the steppe each afternoon. In a few weeks, the camp will pack everything it owns onto the backs of oxen and horses and begin its migration south toward sheltered winter pastures. Before that happens, there is something to be built, a new ger for a new household, and the work of building it, like everything on the steppe, is a thing that involves the hands and hearts of many people at once. Let us visit them there in those last generous weeks of summer and watch how they make a home. The camp wakes before the sun clears the ridge. It does not wake all at once. It stirs in stages, the way a river begins to move after a still night. First the dogs, then the sounds of someone stoking a fire, the creak of a door frame, the soft complaint of a sheep being nudged aside, then the children, and then the adults, and then the slow, enormous fact of another day on the steppe. In the ger of Kasar and Odval, the morning begins with milk tea. Odval is already up, crouching by the iron stove at the center of the ger, where the fire has been kept alive overnight as a low bed of coals. She adds dried dung and a few sticks of brushwood, and the flames catch with a quiet sound, almost like breathing. Water goes into the pot, then crumbled tea, hard, dark bricks of it traded from merchants who carry it north from the lands beyond the Gobi. When the water has boiled and darkened, she adds milk from yesterday's milking and a pinch of salt, and begins the motion that will repeat itself every morning of her life, lifting the tea high in a ladle and pouring it back into the pot over and over, the stream of liquid catching the firelight as it falls. This is how the tea is blended. This is how a household wakes. The ger is warm with the smell of it, salt and smoke and the faintly sweet scent of boiled milk. The felt walls hold the warmth close. Light enters only through the tuno, the circular opening at the crown of the roof, where the roof poles converge like the spokes of a great wheel. Through that opening, a circle of sky is visible, still pale, not yet fully blue. Kasar rises from beneath his blankets and accepts a bowl of tea without speaking. He is a man in his middle 50s, broad across the shoulders, with hands that have been shaped by decades of work, carving wood, gripping reins, pulling lambs from difficult births in the cold of early spring. He drinks slowly, watching the fire. There is no hurry in his movements and no waste. Everything he does has the quality of something considered. Across the gur, in the space nearest the door, the place given to the youngest or newest member of a household, Karen is already awake, folding her blankets with careful, quiet movements, trying not to disturb anyone. She has been living in this gyre for nearly 3 weeks now, and she still moves through the space with the self-consciousness of a guest, aware of where things are kept, aware of the family's routines, but not yet fully at ease within them. This is not her family's gyre. The felt walls were not made by her mother's hands. The stove is positioned slightly differently than the one she grew up beside. These are small things, but they accumulate, and they matter. She is perhaps 19 or 20. Her hair is braided and wound in the style of an unmarried woman, though that will change soon. Her face, when she thinks no one is watching, carries the particular expression of someone holding two feelings at once: the excitement of what is beginning and the quiet ache of what she has left behind. Oddville hands her a bowl of tea, and Karen accepts it with both hands, in the proper way, murmuring her thanks. Their eyes meet for a moment. Oddville nods, not warmly, not coldly, but with the steady acknowledgement of a woman who has been watching and is not yet finished forming her opinion. Outside, the morning continues to arrive. Batu has been up for some time already. Outside the gyre, the morning is already well underway. Batu is with the horses. He is nearly always with the horses at this hour, moving among them where they are hobbled on the hillside east of camp. He checks their legs, runs his hands along their flanks, speaks to them in the low, continuous murmur that horse people everywhere seem to share. A sound that is less language than presence, a way of saying, "I'm here, I know you, you are not alone." The horses tolerate him. A few of the older ones lean into his hand. Batu is 22, lean and quiet, with his father's broad hands and his mother's watchful eyes. He is the second son. His elder brother, already married, already the father of 2 small children, lives in the next gyre over and will one day inherit this camp and these pastures. This is simply the order of things. The first son stays. The second son builds. It is not a punishment or a slight. It is the way the steppe has always worked, the way herds and families grow and divide, like rivers branching, like roots seeking new ground. But knowing this does not make it simple. Everything Batu will have, his ger, his herd, his standing among the families of the Kot Ail, he must earn or build with his own hands. He finishes with the horses and walks back toward camp, where his father is already at work. Kassar has set up his workspace on the south side of their ger, where the morning light is best. Before him, laid out on a felt mat, are the pieces of what will become the walls of his son's new home. The kana, the lattice wall sections, are built from slender poles of willow, each one cut, stripped, and carefully shaped, then bound together in a crisscross pattern with rawhide ties, so that the whole structure can expand and compress like an accordion. When extended, a single kana section forms a curved wall about the height of a man's chest. 5 of these, lashed together in a circle, will form the walls of a standard ger. Kassar has been working on these for weeks. The willow was cut in early summer when the wood is still green and supple enough to bend without splitting. He stripped the bark with a knife, then shaped each pole by hand, shaving it smooth, testing its flex. Some of the poles he rejected. A hidden crack, A knot in the wrong place, a curve that would not hold. These details matter. A kana that buckles under the weight of snow or gives way in a spring storm is not merely an inconvenience, it is a home collapsing. Batu settles beside his father and picks up where he left off the previous evening, drilling the small holes through which the rawhide ties will pass. He uses a hand drill, a simple tool with a fire-hardened point, turning it slowly, steadily, feeling the wood yield. The two men work in near silence. Occasionally Kassar reaches over and adjusts the angle of Batu's drill without a word, and Batu corrects his grip, and they continue. This is how Kassar teaches, not through explanation, but through the shared rhythm of labor. He has been this way for as long as Batu can remember, a man who trusts his hands more than his voice, who believes that knowledge passes best through doing. There was a time when this frustrated Batu, when he wished his father would simply say what he meant, but he is older now, and he understands something he could not have understood as a boy, that his father's silence is not indifference, it is a kind of respect. It says without words that he believes his son is capable, that he will be here beside him while he learns. Nearby, leaning against the sunny side of the ger with a bowl of tea cooling in his hands, Tseren watches them work. Tseren is Kassar's uncle, his father's younger brother, and at perhaps 68 or 70 years of age, he is the oldest person in the camp. His body has settled into the particular economy of movement that age demands. He walks with a slight favoring of his left hip. He lowers himself to sit with deliberate care, and he no longer rides the way he once did, when he could spend a full day in the saddle and rise the next morning without stiffness. But his eyes are clear, and his mind is a deep well that has not silted over. People come to him, not only from this camp, but sometimes from neighboring ones, riding half a day to sit beside his fire and put a question to him. He does not give advice easily. He has a way of listening that makes the person speaking feel as though they have been heard completely. And then he will often respond not with an answer, but with a story, or an observation about the weather, or a question of his own that somehow illuminates the problem from a direction the asker had not considered. This can be maddening. It can also be exactly what is needed. His wife Saran passed several years ago, peacefully in the winter, the way the old sometimes simply let go when the cold comes. He speaks of her without heaviness. She is woven into his conversation the way the river is woven into the landscape, always present, always part of the shape of things. He might mention that Saran would have said the wool needs another beating, or recall the year the two of them wintered near the birch grove, and there is no grief in it, only the quiet fact of a life fully shared and fully remembered. He has accepted her absence the way he accepts the turning of the seasons, not because he does not feel it, but because he understands that the world is made of arrivals and departures, and that love does not require the beloved to be present in order to continue. This morning he watches Kassar and Batu work on the kana, and he sips his tea, and after a long while he remarks, to no one in particular, that the willow is good this year. Kassar grunts in agreement. Saran adds, almost as an afterthought, that Saran always said one could tell the character of a winter by the willows that grew after it, that a hard winter makes flexible wood. He pauses, then observes that she may have been talking about people. Batu smiles but does not look up from his drilling. Seren lets the silence return. The sound of the hand drill, the creak of willow, the distant bleating of sheep. These fill the space where words might have been, and they are enough. On the western side of the camp, the felt making has begun. This is women's work, not exclusively, but primarily, and it is communal in the deepest sense. The sheer physical scale of the task demands many hands, and so the women of the cot ale have gathered. Oddval, Seren, two women from neighboring Gers, and Batu's elder brother's wife, a calm, efficient woman with a toddler tied to her back in a cloth sling. Naran is here too, Batu's younger sister, 12 years old, watching everything with the wide-eyed attention of someone determined to learn. The process begins with wool. The sheep were shorn earlier in the summer, and the raw fleece has been washed and dried and now sits in great heaped piles, soft and slightly oily, smelling of lanolin and grass and animal warmth. The first task is beating, spreading the wool on a flat surface and striking it with long, flexible sticks to loosen the fibers and drive out any remaining debris. This is rhythmic, physical work. The sticks rise and fall in alternating patterns, and the sound they make, a steady, muffled thudding, carries across the camp like a second heartbeat. Seren works at the beating with a focus that impresses Oddval, though Oddval does not say so. Seren's arms are strong. She has done this before, in her mother's camp, since she was Naran's age, and she falls into the rhythm quickly, adjusting her stance and her grip to match the pace of the women around her. There is a rightness to this work that settles something in her. She knows how to do this. In a world of unfamiliar rhythms and careful silences, the beating of wool is something her body remembers. Naran, stationed beside Seren, struggles to keep up. Her stick is slightly too long for her, and her strikes lack the fluid, wrist-driven snap that the older women have mastered. She compensates with enthusiasm, bringing the stick down with her whole arm, which means she tires faster. After a while, she pauses to catch her breath and watches Karen's hands instead. She observes aloud that Karen holds the stick lower than the others. Karen explains quietly that her mother taught her this way, that the wrist does the work, not the shoulder, and she adjusts Naran's grip gently, one hand over the girl's, demonstrating the motion. Naran tries it. The first few strikes are awkward, but then something clicks, and the stick moves with a new ease, and Naran grins. Oddval, working a few paces away, watches this exchange from the corner of her eye and says nothing. But something in her expression shifts, a softening so slight that only someone who knew her well would notice it. The beaten wool is then layered onto a large mat made of old hide, spread evenly in thick, overlapping sheets. Hot water is poured over it, kettles brought from the fires, steaming in the cool morning air, and the wool is sprinkled and patted until it is thoroughly damp. Then the mat is rolled up tightly around the wool, bound with rope, and the real work begins. The rolled bundle is tied to a rope and hitched to a horse, and a rider drags it across the open steppe at a steady trot. The friction and pressure, the constant tumbling and compression, is what transforms loose wool into felt. The fibers lock together, tighten, bind into a dense, warm fabric that will shed rain and hold heat and last for years. This part of the process can take hours. The rider circles the camp, the bundle bouncing and turning behind the horse, and the women watch and wait and prepare the next batch. It is hard, honest, patient work, and it will take many days to produce enough felt to cover a 5-walled jur. But there is pleasure in it too, in the shared labor, in the conversation that flows between the women as they work, in the satisfaction of watching raw wool become something strong and useful. The felt they are making will be the walls and roof of the home where Batu and Tseren will begin their life together. Every fiber in it will have passed through their hands. The days take on a pattern, each one folding into the next the way the steppe folds into the sky, seamlessly, without sharp edges. Mornings begin with milking and tea, the sound of milk striking the inside of a wooden pail carrying across the quiet camp. The men work the herds and continue the woodwork for the jur. The women beat and layer and roll the felt. Midday brings a rest, the heat heavy even in late summer, the animals drowsy in the shade of the ridge, their flanks warm to the touch. Afternoons hold more work, Kasar shaping the uni, the long roof poles that will radiate from the crown of the gear like the rays of the sun. Odval beginning to stitch the felt panels together, Tseren helping with the dairy work, processing the day's milk into the foods that will sustain the camp through the coming winter. Evenings bring food and fire and sometimes the particular quietness that falls over a camp when the work is done and the sky is turning. It is during these evening hours that Batu and Tseren are most often together. Not alone, true privacy is a rare thing in a camp of felt-walled gurs, but near each other, in the half-public, half-intimate space of the family fire. They sit and share food. They speak, though not always easily. They are still learning the geography of each other, what makes the other laugh, what draws silence, where the comfortable places are, and where the uncertain ones. One evening, Karen is helping Odval prepare dried curds, arul, pressing the strained yogurt between flat stones to squeeze out the moisture, then cutting the compressed curds into small pieces to dry in the sun. Batu comes to sit nearby, smelling of horse and wood shavings, and watches her work with an expression that he probably thinks is subtle. Tseren, without looking up, tells him he is welcome to help. He hesitates, admitting with a hint of self-consciousness that he is not sure he would do it properly. She points out, with a trace of amusement, that it is only cutting, and that he cuts wood all day. He takes the knife, he cuts, the curd crumbles. Tseren presses her lips together, trying very hard not to laugh, and fails. She shows him the angle, the way the blade moves through the soft curd in a single smooth motion rather than pressing down. He tries again. This time, the piece holds its shape. She tells him it is not so difficult, and he concedes that she is a patient teacher. She replies, half smiling, with something her mother always said, that patience is wasted on the willing and that it is the stubborn ones who need it. He asks which one he is. She considers him with theatrical seriousness and tells him she has not decided yet. He laughs, a real laugh, sudden and unguarded, and for a moment the careful distance between them closes, and they are simply two people discovering that they enjoy each other's company. These moments are small, but they accumulate the way snow accumulates, one flake at a time until the ground is covered and the world looks different. Odval, passing behind them with an armload of dried dung for the fire, allows herself the ghost of a smile. The tuno is the last piece Kasar will build, and the most important. The crown ring of a gur is more than a structural element. It is the opening through which sunlight enters and smoke departs. It is the circle of sky that the family sees when they look up from their hearth. In the understanding of the steppe peoples, it is the connection between the earth where people live and Tengri, the eternal blue sky, the highest spirit, the presence that watches over all things. To build a tuno is to build the eye of a home. Kasar has been saving a particular piece of birch for this purpose, dense, fine-grained, harvested from a grove near the river where the old trees grow slowly and well. He works on it in the afternoons, alone, shaping the ring with a slow, meditative precision that is different from his usual pace. He sands the inner curve with a rough stone. He carves the slots where the uni, the roof poles, will fit. He works until the wood is smooth to the touch and the ring is true, and then he works a little more. One afternoon, Charon comes and sits beside him, and they share the silence for a long time before Charon speaks. He mentions that Kasar's father built the tuno for his own gur many years ago. Kasar pauses his sanding. He did not know this. Tseren recalls that the old man was younger than Kasar is now, and that when he delivered the finished ring, he expressed a simple hope that the sky would look well through it. Tseren had told him that would depend on the sky. Kasar smiles. He observes that it sounds like something his father would say. Tseren replies, gently, that it also sounds like something Kasar would say. They sit quietly. The river makes its sounds. A hawk circles high overhead, riding a thermal, its wings unmoving. After a while, Tseren offers a reflection. He has noticed, he says, a thing about building for someone else. When a man builds something for himself, he can forgive his own mistakes. A wall that is slightly uneven, a pole that does not sit perfectly. He accepts these things because they are his. But when he builds for someone he loves, every imperfection becomes a worry. He wants it to be right. He wants it to be worthy. Kasar turns the ring in his hands, examining its curve. Tseren adds that the gear does not need to be perfect. It needs to be made with care. There is a difference. He does not say anything more, and he does not need to. The two men sit together while the afternoon light moves across the steppe, and Kasar returns to his sanding, and the ring grows smoother under his hands. The days after Kasar finishes the Tuno pass quickly, and then the riders begin to appear on the horizon. They arrive over the course of 3 days, families from across the surrounding steppe, some from as close as a half-day's ride, others from 2 or 3 days distant. They come on horseback and on foot, with their herds trailing behind them, and their children perched atop packed oxen, wide-eyed at the journey. The camp, which has held 5 jurs all summer, swells to 15, then 20. The meadow along the river fills with animals. The air fills with voices. This is the late summer gathering, an old tradition, informal but important, that brings the scattered families of the region together before the autumn migration separates them again. It is a time for trading livestock and goods, for sharing news from distant pastures, for renewing bonds between clans that cooperate in times of hardship. It is also simply a celebration, a recognition that life on the steppe, for all its demands, has its seasons of abundance, and those seasons deserve to be marked. There are horse races organized in the old way. The riders are children, light enough that the horses can run their fastest over the long distances of the open steppe. Naran rides. She has been training for weeks, rising early to practice with a fast mare from her father's herd. She does not win, but she finishes strong, flushed and breathless, and when she slides from the mare's back, her legs are shaking and her grin is wider than the horizon. There is wrestling in the grass and trade. A man arriving with fine colts from the western valleys, spending an afternoon in quiet negotiation with Kassar's elder son until 2 colts have changed hands in exchange for felt and a carved saddle frame. There is laughter and news and the slow rekindling of friendships that distance has cooled. But it is the music in the evenings that settles over everything and draws the camp into stillness. Around the largest fire, someone produces a horsehead fiddle, the Morin Kur, 2-stringed, its carved head leaning from the neck of the instrument like a watchful animal, and begins to play. The sound is reedy and fluid, rising and falling in long, sustained tones that seem to mirror the shape of the landscape itself. The long horizon, the slow curve of the hills, the wind moving over grass. It fills the space between the jeers the way water fills a bowl, gently and completely. A man begins to sing in the overtone style, producing 2 notes at once, a low drone and a high, ethereal melody that seems to come from somewhere other than his body, as though the steppe itself has found a voice. The listeners grow quiet. The fire crackles. The melody moves outward into the dark, unhurried, patient, carrying with it the particular ache of beauty that asks nothing in return. Batu, sitting near the fire, watches Karen across the circle of light. She is sitting among women from a newly arrived camp, laughing at something one of them has said, and there is an ease in her expression that he has not seen before. She looks up and catches his eye, and for a moment the firelight holds both their faces, his quiet, hers bright, and something passes between them that neither of them could name if asked. It is the particular warmth of being known by someone who is still becoming known to you. It is the beginning of something. On the second day of the gathering, Karen's mother arrives. Her name is Enktuya, and she rides in from the south on a gray mare, accompanied by 2 of Karen's cousins and a small herd of goats that are gifts for the new household. She is a woman of perhaps 45, with a face that holds both strength and gentleness in equal measure, the kind of face that has weathered many winters without hardening. She dismounts, and she scans the camp with the particular searching look of a mother who has been apart from her daughter for too long. Saren sees her from across the camp. She is in the middle of helping Oddval stretch a length of felt across a drying frame, and her hands go still on the cloth, and then she is setting it down, and then she is walking, quickly at first, then faster. And then she is in her mother's arms, and the wind moves through the camp around them, and the smell of grass and horse and home is everywhere, and neither of them speaks for a long time. When they do speak, it is all at once. Questions overlapping answers, laughter breaking through, hands gripping hands. Enktuya holds Karen at arm's length and studies her with the careful, reading eye of a mother who knows her daughter's face better than her own, who can see in its lines and colors the story of the weeks they have spent apart. She tells Saren she is thinner. Saren insists she is the same. Enktuya maintains her position, adding that Karen has not been sleeping enough. But then she softens, touching her daughter's cheek and says that despite it all, Karen looks well. She looks, her mother tells her, like someone who is where she is supposed to be, even if she has not quite realized it yet. Saren's eyes fill, and she blinks the tears back, and Enktuya pretends not to notice, which is its own form of kindness. They spend the afternoon together, walking along the river, sitting in the grass, catching up on the accumulated details of time apart. Karen tells her mother about Oddval, about the felt making, about the gur taking shape. She speaks about Batu, carefully, the way one handles something that is still new and therefore fragile. She describes his quietness, his way of working beside his father, the evening with the cheese curds when he made her laugh. Enktuya listens to all of it, and then she asks the question that matters most to her, whether he makes Saren laugh. Saren admits that he does, sometimes, when she is not expecting it. Her mother observes that this is the best kind. Then she asks about Oddval, how Batu's mother has been with her. Saren considers her answer carefully. She says that Oddval is fair, that she watches, that Saren thinks she is waiting to see what her son's bride is made of. Enktuya surprises her daughter by saying that this is good. She explains that a mother-in-law who watches is a mother-in-law who cares. The ones who ignore a new bride are the ones to worry about. Oddval wants to know that her son has chosen well, and Saren should show her that he has. Saren says quietly that she is trying. Enktuya takes her daughter's hand and tells her she knows. Then she shares something she has never told Saren before, that when she herself left her own mother's camp to join Saren's father's family, she cried every night for the first month, pressing her face into the felt so no one would hear. Saren is startled. Her mother never mentioned this. Enktuya explains that by the second month, the crying had stopped, and by the third, she had begun to understand something important, that the camp she had come to was not replacing the one she had left. It was adding to it. A woman's world does not shrink when she moves into a new family, she tells her daughter. It grows. They sit together as the sun begins to lower and the steppe turns gold around them, and for the first time since she arrived in Batu's camp, Karen feels the tightness in her chest begin to loosen, not disappear, but ease, the way a knot eases when you stop pulling and simply let it rest. Oddval watches the reunion from a distance, and something complicated moves through her. She recognizes Enktuya's type, a competent, loving mother who has raised a competent, loving daughter, and this reassures her. She has been watching Karen closely these past weeks, the way one watches a piece of felt in the final stages of working, looking for weak spots, for places where the fibers have not fully bonded, for flaws that might become problems later. What she has seen mostly is strength. Saren works hard and learns quickly. She is respectful without being meek. She handles the animals well. She corrected Naran's grip on the beating stick with a gentleness that Oddval recognized as teaching rather than showing off. But Oddval also sees something else in this reunion, something that touches a place in her that she does not often examine. She sees a mother's love for a daughter who is leaving, and she sees it from the other side, as the mother of a son who is building a separate hearth. She is not losing Batu. She knows this. He will be 10 paces away in the new ger, and she will see him every day. But there is a difference between presence and proximity, and she is old enough to understand that the difference matters. The boy who once slept beside her fire will light his own. That evening, Oddvil does something that surprises everyone, including herself. She approaches Enktuya at the communal fire and sits beside her, and the two mothers talk for a long time about the felt that has been made, about the jeer that is taking shape, about the herd that will be divided to give the young couple their start. They talk about practical things because practical things are safe, but underneath the practicality, there is an understanding that passes between them. They are both giving something up so that something new can begin, and they are both going to be fine, and the young ones are going to be fine, and this is how the world continues. Before they part for the night, Oddvil tells Enktuya that her daughter is good with wool. Enktuya replies, with just enough pride to make it warm rather than boastful, that Terran learned from her. Oddvil is quiet for a moment, and then she says, simply and without embellishment, that Saren will do well here. It is the closest thing to an embrace that Oddvil's character allows, and Enktuya receives it for exactly what it is. The wooden frame is finished. Kassar lays out all the pieces in the grass beside his gur, the 5 kana sections, fully bound and ready to expand. The door frame carved from birch and painted orange with a dye made from iron-rich clay. The 81 uni, each one tapered and smoothed, the lower end sharpened to fit into the loops atop the kana, the upper end notched to slot into the crown ring, and the tuno itself resting on a cloth, golden pale, its inner surface smooth as water. He and Batu have spent the final day fitting everything together in a trial assembly, extending the kana, fitting the door, lifting the crown on its 2 supporting poles, and sliding the uni into their slots one by one to test the fit. The tuno accepts each pole with a firm, clean resistance, like a hand closing around a gift. When the last uni is in place, the skeleton of the gur stands complete, an open lattice dome, the sky visible through its every gap, the wind passing through it as though through the ribs of some gentle, enormous animal. Batu stands inside and looks up through the tuno at the sky. The circle is perfect, the blue is very deep. Kassar stands beside him and says nothing, but he rests his hand on Batu's shoulder, briefly, firmly, and that is enough. They take the frame down again. It will be raised properly, with the felt and the ceremony and the whole camp watching when the day is right. But the trial has proven what needed proving. The pieces fit. The home will hold. Saren chooses the day. He studies the sky for 3 mornings in a row, the movement of clouds, the direction of the wind, the position of the Pleiades in the hours before dawn. The Pleiades are visible now, returning to the autumn sky after their summer absence, and their position relative to the moon tells him things about the coming season that no one else in the camp can read with quite the same fluency. On the 3rd morning, he announces that tomorrow will be a good day. The wind will be gentle. The sky will be clear. The spirits of the land, he says, are well disposed. The camp wakes early. There is an energy in the air, not urgency, but anticipation, the pleasant hum of something about to happen that everyone has been working toward. The women prepare food, boiled mutton, dried curds, fresh cream skimmed from the morning's milk. The children are sent to gather dried dung for a celebratory fire. Enktuya, who has stayed in camp through the gathering, helps Saren braid her hair in a new way, the style of a married woman, or nearly so, looped looped and coiled and held with a clasp made of polished bone. The spot for the new gear has been chosen with care, near enough to the family camp to share its protection, far enough to give the new household its own space. The ground there is level, the grass cropped short by grazing sheep, and it faces south as all gers must, so that the door will greet the sun. Kassar brings the pieces, Batu helps him carry them, and the two men lay everything out in order. The kana first, then the door frame, then the uni bundled in their groups, and finally the tuno, wrapped in its cloth, placed to the side like something precious. The camp gathers. 20-30 people, the families of the cot ale and the visiting clans from the gathering, form a loose circle around the site. There is no formality to this, no rigid ceremony. It is simply what people do when something important is being built. They come, they watch, they help when help is needed. Kassar and Batu extend the first kana section, and the lattice expands with a sound like a deep, slow breath, the creak and pop of rawhide ties adjusting, wood settling into its full span. They set it on the ground and move to the next. One by one, the wall sections are extended and lashed together, forming a circle. The door frame is fitted into place, its orange-painted surface catching the morning light. A rope is wound around the outside of the walls, holding them steady. Then the tuno is lifted. This requires several people. 2 tall poles, the bagana, are set inside the circle, and the crown ring is raised onto them and held in place while the first uni are slotted in, radiating outward from the ring to the top of the walls. Each pole that is added braces the structure further, and by the time a third of the uni are in place, the dome begins to hold its own shape, the tension distributed evenly across the frame. Batu works steadily, handing poles up to his brother, who stands on a low stool inside the circle and fits them into the tuno's notches with the careful precision of a man threading a needle. Saren watches from the edge of the circle, Naran beside her, both of them quiet. The last uni goes in. The frame stands complete, and for a moment everyone simply looks at it, this airy, graceful skeleton of a home open to the sky, its ribs golden in the sunlight, the circle of the tuno framing a disk of perfect, depthless blue. Then the felt is brought. The panels that Oddval and Saren and the other women spent weeks making are carried forward and unfurled. They are thick and dense, pale gray, smelling faintly of lanolin. The first layer is draped over the frame and smoothed into place, and the jeer begins to close, the lattice disappearing behind the felt, the interior dimming as the walls take shape. A second layer follows, and a third for the roof, each one secured with ropes and straps. The canvas outer cover goes on last, white and clean, tied down against the wind. When it is finished, the gyr stands on the open step like a thing that has always been there, round and solid and exactly right, its felt walls glowing faintly in the sun, its door facing south, its tuno open to the sky. The interior is bare. The felt floor covering has been laid, but there is no furniture, no bedding, no stored food. There is only the hearth, a flat stone placed at the center of the gyr directly beneath the tuno, and beside it a small bundle of kindling and dried dung and a fire steel and a pouch of tinder. Saren enters first. He moves slowly, with the careful dignity of a man who understands that what he is about to do carries weight beyond the practical. He looks around the interior, at the felt walls, at the lattice pattern faintly visible through them, at the roof poles converging overhead, at the circle of sky above, and he nods once, as though confirming something to himself. He kneels beside the hearthstone. What he says is not a speech. It is closer to a conversation, addressed partly to the people gathered at the doorway, partly to the spirits of the place, and partly to something larger and less definable. He speaks of Tengri, the eternal blue sky, and of Etujan, the Earth Mother, and he asks that this home be held between them, protected from above and nourished from below. He speaks of the fire that is about to be lit and asks that it burn steadily through the seasons, that it warm the hands of those who sit beside it, that it light the faces of children not yet born. He speaks of Batu and Charon by name and wishes them the things that matter on the steppe: healthy animals, kind weather, the wisdom to know when to move and when to stay. Then he strikes the fire steel against the flint. Sparks fall into the tinder. A thin curl of smoke rises, catches, and becomes flame. The fire is small at first, a modest, flickering thing, barely enough to warm a pair of hands. Charon feeds it carefully, adding kindling piece by piece, and it grows, and the light fills the gear, and the felt walls seem to breathe with it, expanding outward with warmth. Batu and Charon enter together. They stand by the fire, and the smoke rises between them and passes through the tuno into the open sky. Above, the blue is deepening with the coming evening, and the first star appears, a single point of light, steady and sure, centered in the opening as though placed there deliberately. Oddval enters next, carrying a pot of milk tea, the first tea that will be made in this ger. She sets it on the fire without ceremony, and the ordinary, domestic sound of liquid beginning to warm fills the new home, and it is perhaps the most beautiful sound any of them have heard. The camp files in, filling the ger beyond its comfortable capacity, sitting shoulder to shoulder on the felt floor, and Charon serves the tea in the way she was taught, both hands on the bowl, offered with a slight bow, beginning with Charon, then Kasser, then Oddval, then the elders, then the guests, and finally, last of all, she pours a bowl for Batu and one for herself, and they drink together beside their own fire for the first time. Enktuya, seated near the door, watches her daughter serve the tea and recognizes in her movements the echo of her own teaching. The angle of the pour, the steadiness of the hands, the quiet attention to who is served first and who waits. She says nothing. She does not need to. Charon catches her eye across the crowded jeer, and her mother gives her a look that holds everything: pride, love, the ache of letting go, and the deep, sustaining knowledge that her daughter is going to be all right. The gathering disperses slowly over the following days. Families pack their gers and ride out with their herds, heading toward their own autumn pastures, and the camp contracts back to its usual size, 5 gers, now 6. Enktuya is among the last to leave. She and Charon stand together beside the gray mare on the morning of her departure, and they hold each other for a long time, and the words they speak are quiet enough that the wind carries them away before anyone else can hear. Then Enktuya mounts and rides south, and Charon watches until the horse and rider are a speck on the steppe, and then she watches a little longer, and then she turns back to the camp and the work that is waiting. The new ger acquires its furniture piece by piece: a wooden bed frame, a low table, storage chests for clothing and tools, a rack for drying meat and cheese. Saren arranges the interior in the way she was taught. The man's things on the west side, the woman's on the east, the place of honor at the north, opposite the door. She hangs a pouch of dried herbs from one of the roof poles, a gift from her mother, lavender and thyme from the southern pastures, and the gyre fills with a scent that is half this life and half the one she came from. Batu brings in his saddle and bow and hangs them in their proper place. He stands in the doorway for a moment, looking at the interior, at the felt walls they made together, at the fire that Saren lit, at the circle of sky above, and something settles in him, a feeling he does not have words for but recognizes nonetheless. It is the feeling of arriving somewhere he did not know he was traveling toward. In the evenings, they sit together by their fire, and the silence between them is beginning to change. It is no longer the silence of two people who do not know what to say. It is becoming the silence of two people who do not always need to speak, the companionable quiet of shared presence, of being in the same place at the same time, a quiet discovery that nothing else is needed. One night, Saren asks Batu to tell her something about himself, something she does not already know. He thinks for a long time. Then he tells her about a day in his childhood when he was 5 or 6 years old and wandered away from the camp following a marmot. By the time he looked up, the gyres had disappeared. He was terrified. He cried for a while, and then he stopped crying and lay down in the grass, and he looked up at the sky, and it was so large and so full of stars that he forgot to be afraid. He just lay there and watched. His father found him before dawn and said the boy had been asleep with his eyes open. Karen smiles. She observes, gently, that he has now built himself a home with a hole in the roof so he can look at the sky from his bed. He tells her he had not thought of it that way. She replies that she thinks he had, that this is exactly why the tuno matters to him. He looks at her, this woman he is still learning, who sees things in him that he has not yet seen in himself, and the firelight moves across both their faces, and the night is very quiet, and the stars fill the circle of the tuno above them like a bowl of light. The preparations for the autumn migration begin in earnest. There is a focused, purposeful energy in the camp, not anxiety, but the steady concentration of people who have done this many times and know what it requires. Kassar kneels beside a pack saddle, running his thumb along each leather strap, testing for cracks, replacing one that has gone stiff with age. The sound of his knife cutting new rawhide, steady and unhurried in the morning air. Nearby, the women bundle dried meat and curd into hide pouches, the sharp smell of dried dairy mixing with the scent of autumn grass. The herds are counted and gathered closer to camp. Batu and Karen pack their own gur for the first time, learning its weight, its balance, how the felt folds, how the kana compress and bind, how the uni bundle together, how the tuno must be wrapped carefully in cloth and carried upright so that the ring keeps its shape. It takes them longer than it takes the experienced families. They make mistakes. The felt does not fold quite right the first time. A rope tangles. Saren discovers that the pack for the door frame needs to be redistributed or it will overbalance the ox. They figure it out. They work through the problems together, adjusting, trying again, developing a rhythm that is theirs alone. And when the gyre is fully packed and loaded, their entire home reduced to neat bundles on the backs of 2 oxen and a horse. They stand beside their animals and look at the bare circle of pressed grass where the gur stood, and they feel, both of them, the strange lightness of carrying everything they own. Tseren walks the camp one last time before the migration begins. He pauses at the river and looks north toward the summer pastures they are leaving. He has made this journey more times than he can count. The slow procession south, the herds moving like a living river across the yellowing steppe. He has made it with Saran beside him, and he has made it without her, and both versions of the journey are part of who he is. Naran rides up beside him on her mare, breathless, impatient. She asks whether they are going. Tseren looks at her, this girl at the beginning of everything, burning with the desire to move, to see, to become, and he smiles. He tells her they are going. The migration begins at dawn. The camp moves south in a long, loose column. Horses and cattle and sheep and goats, oxen loaded with bundled jers and household goods, dogs running the edges of the herd, riders moving back and forth along the flanks to keep the animals together. The column stretches across the steppe for half a mile, and from a distance it looks like a single living thing moving slowly and steadily across the enormous landscape. Batu rides near the front, helping manage the horse herd. Tseren rides beside the oxen that carry their gear, watching the loads, making sure nothing shifts or loosens. Naran is everywhere at once, galloping ahead and circling back, her mare nimble and sure-footed on the uneven ground. Kassar and Adval ride together, side by side, not speaking, the way couples do when they have shared enough years that their silence is itself a language. Tseren rides in the middle of the column, his old horse picking its way carefully, and he watches the steppe open up before them, the long golden expanse of autumn grass, the sky enormous above, the distant blue line of the mountains that mark the edge of the winter pastures. He has seen this view so many times that it lives inside him, and yet it still moves him, the way certain things never stop being beautiful no matter how often they are encountered. Picture it now, the slow, steady movement of people and animals across a landscape so vast it seems to have no edges. The creak of leather, the low, constant sound of hooves on grass, the occasional call of a rider to a straying animal, that sharp, quick syllable that cuts through the wind and brings the animal back into line. The smell of horses and dust and the dry sweetness of grass that is turning from green to gold. The light falling long and amber across everything, making the steppe glow. In the column, Batu looks back and finds Tseren. She is adjusting a strap on one of the oxen, her braid swinging, her face focused. She looks up, as though she can feel his gaze and sees him watching, and she raises one hand, not waving, just lifting it, palm open, a gesture that means nothing more than presence and acknowledgement. And he raises his hand in return, and the column keeps moving, carrying them south. Let us leave them there. The migration will take several days, and at the end of it, in a sheltered valley where the river bends and the hills break the worst of the winter wind, the families will stop and unpack their gers and raise them again, and the circle of felt-walled homes will form once more, and the hearth fires will be lit, and the animals will settle into the new pastures, and the rhythm of life will continue. Batu and Keren will raise their ger in that winter valley, faster this time, surer, their hands remembering what their minds are still learning. They will build their fire beneath the tuno and watch the smoke rise into the cold, clear air. They will spend their first winter together in that small, warm, felt-walled world, learning each other's rhythms, discovering the shape of the life they are making, its comforts and its rough edges alike. Some nights will be easy, some will be hard. They will disagree about small things and forgive each other quickly, the way people do when they share a single round room and there is nowhere to go but closer. Adval will visit them often, bringing tea, bringing advice, bringing the kind of love that expresses itself through practical concern. She will teach Saren things Saren did not think she still needed to learn, and Saren will teach her things in return, and the distance between them will continue to close, slowly and honestly, until one day it is simply gone. Kassar will sit by his own fire in the evenings and listen to the sounds of the camp settling, the murmur of voices, the shifting of animals, the occasional bright thread of Naran's laughter carrying through the felt walls. And he will feel the deep, quiet satisfaction of a man who has built something that will outlast him. Saren will watch the winter stars through his tuno and think of Saran and of the years that stretch behind him like a long, well-traveled road, and he will feel not sadness but gratitude for the life he has lived, for the people he has loved, for the world continuing to turn beneath those familiar stars, carrying everyone forward into whatever comes next. And Naran, restless, curious, hungry for the horizon, will grow. She will learn the things that the steppe teaches, patience and toughness and the art of reading the sky. She will ride farther than she has ever ridden. She will ask questions that have no answers and be satisfied with the asking. The world before her is enormous and full of possibility, and she will meet it with open hands. The steppe is quiet now. The column has passed, and the grass is bending back where the hooves pressed it down, and the land is returning to itself. The river moves, the wind moves, the sky, that immense and depthless blue, holds everything beneath it. The camps and the herds, the mountains and the valleys, the people who are traveling and the people who have arrived. Let the sound of their journey settle now. The soft percussion of hooves, the creak of leather, the low song of wind through grass that has been growing here for longer than anyone can remember. The steppe holds them all gently and without hurry, with the steady assurance that the world will still be here in the morning. The fire in Batu and Charon's Ger burns low. The smoke thins to a whisper. Through the tuno, the stars are very close, so close they seem almost near enough to touch, bright and cool, like stones gathered from a riverbed. The camp is settled, the herds are still. The people in this story are safe in their felt-walled homes, and the night is kind, the sky full of light, the steppe stretching on in every direction, vast, quiet, patient, holding everything in the gentle dark, as it always has, as it will long after this night has passed into morning.